So I'm going to talk about retail and hospitality, and I don't think that anybody is going to probably think anything other than the fact that it's a bit of a challenging conversation in order to try and find any highlights of the last couple of years, because it's been pretty tragic. So I'm going to just tell you the way in which it is. Start off with the retail sector and give a bit of an idea of retail place rankings for some of the towns and cities around here. The vacancy rates, which pretty much exclusively have increased. I'm going to touch on some department store deals, because that's been one of the casualties of our marketplace. But actually, we're seeing the reuse of some of this stuff now, and I just wanted to dwell on a couple of deals there. And we'll look at prime zone A's as well in those centres. And those prime zone A's will follow an awful lot of what you would expect in terms of rents associated with vacancy. So loads of data up here. And I won't go through it all, but if you want to see the precise hard and fast numbers, let me or Lucy know and I can send you this slide deck. But what I wanted to do is just compare some of the centres with their peer group, if you like. And so you can see Winchester at the top. That centre would compare with the likes of Salisbury, Barnstaple and Halifax as a retail centre. Portsmouth compares with Bournemouth, Blackpool, as retail centres, and interestingly Gunwharf Quays. I think you see Portsmouth up here at 102. Gunwharf Quays itself as a fashion destination is number 56 in the charts, if you like. And so Gunwharf Quays as a fashion destination itself is the same size as the whole of Guildford. So a really big and important retail opportunity for Portsmouth. Fareham, Bournemouth and Basingstoke, you can see. I'll just drop down to Southampton at 18. And its peer group include Leicester, Aberdeen, Norwich and Edinburgh. Edinburgh, surprisingly, perhaps. So here, vacancy rates. This is the change between 2019 and 2021. So frankly horrible for Southampton. 10% of the stock has become vacant since 2019. Little take-ups in Winchester and Portsmouth, but fairly marginal. But again, following the trend as what you would imagine. Everything you've read in the press is trouble for the retail industry, and that's illustrated with the increasing vacancy rates. So I touched on the department store deals. There are three there, House of Fraser, two Houses of Fraser actually, one in Chichester and one in Bournemouth, and then the Knight and Lee and Southsea. The Knight and Lee and Southsea in particular, I think really going to be a really exciting development actually, because it's been bought by that group, which is the development side of Ray Kelvin, who is the man behind Ted Baker. And you're going to see something, I think, pretty innovative there. But those last two deals at around 50 quid a square foot capital value, that is, £50 a square foot capital value for those stores, is the sort of benchmark that we're seeing with a lot of developers and investors. If you can buy in big space at that price, then its reuse works. The top one that you'll see, House of Fraser in Chichester, there's a bit of a retail angle, residential angle with that, so it's a higher price. And then prime zone A's for each of those centres, you can see up there, all of them at least 20% off. And I just wanted to pick on Portsmouth because Portsmouth at now under £100 has shown such a dramatic decline in retail values. I was doing rent reviews in Commercial Road in Portsmouth in the mid-1990s, and rents were £180 zone A there, now at 85 quid, so less than half of what they were 25 years ago or so. Turning to the hospitality sector, a little bit of better news apart from cinemas. This has been tragic for them during COVID and in the lockdown. You can see the value of admissions in the pale blue lines and then the revenue for 2021 in the purple lines. And so cinemas, like casinos, like nightclubs, like any late night vertical drinking, badly hit by the pandemic. And you can see this little wedge up here on the right hand side. That's $47 billion that's been taken out of the cinema market in the last 18 months. Painful. But I wanted to just start on a few more positive things. And although these look a little bit negative, I just want to dwell back to two dates in particular. So I'm going to turn to my notes to make sure I don't get these wrong. So 12th of April was the day that pubs could reopen outdoors. was the day that we took our blankie in our jacket off to the pub garden and sat and froze. One of my clients was very proud about the idea that he had taken 2 days off work in order to experience his pub outdoors. Well, I say one day presumably to experience it, the following day either the hair or the dog or to recover from it. So the 12th of April was the day that we opened outdoors, and then the 17th of May was the date that it reopened inside. Remember when we used to have to scan ourselves in and use a QR code to get the menu and all of that kind of stuff. But up on the top are the trading figures for Shepherd Neame, so Southeast Buyers Pub Company, Edge of London. And their sales in that first period when you could only be out in the garden were 62% of 2019. Now, most of them, I think, regarded that as being pretty good, although probably not quite at break-even point. But what it did do, it started the re-interaction of the pubs back with the customers again. And I think that probably most of us would say that we sat out in the garden and braved it for a bit. But those pubs that made the effort to try and keep us a little bit warm with a blanket, a patio heater or whatever it might be, were the pub that we then went back to again if the experience was pretty good once you could open inside. And so when they could open inside, even though there was reduced capacities, you can see that they were then at 97% of 2019 sales. And so what that's showing is that even with reduced capacity inside and all of the obstacles, that actually people were embracing going back to the pub. And so that performance, I think, was pretty good. And then you can see the last stat, once kind of trading normality has been reached, they were at 91% of 2019 sales. And I just want to explain that in the context of Shepherd Neame, which would have a real variety of different pubs, of wet-led, small pubs, lots of pubs where you would ordinarily be standing, as well as tenanted and managed pubs. And that's probably a good outcome for them. Young's, an estate that we'd be familiar with, slightly bigger pubs, slightly more food-led, lots more outside space with Young's pub, and even though their reputation is perhaps to be around London, they've actually got an awful lot of home counties pubs. They were at 95% of 2019 level. But the interesting stat here, I think, is Brunning & Price, because Brunning & Price's estate is entirely destination, food-led, big pubs. Loads of car parking, loads of outside space, some play areas, and a mid to premium pricing range. And they stormed 2019 comparison. And so what you can see from that information is that was the type of pub that we all went to. Got in the car, drove out, had to sit down, ordered some food, and felt kind of comfortable either indoors or out in that type of environment. They did really well, and so I think that these are publicly available figures, but when you look at some of the private companies like Heartstone Inns or Upham or Red Mist that are all around this region, going to be expecting them to all produce the same kind of figures as those. And profits will be pretty strong during that trading period as well because of the incentives that went into those businesses. The reduction on VAT on food and the no rates and all of that kind of stuff. A couple of bullet points at the bottom, like-for-like sales. In 2021, we're 8% above the same period in 2019, so good. And trade outside the M25, better than inside the M25. I guess we probably would expect that as well. So this is just 3 pictures of some legacy stuff that's come out of COVID. The orbs just here are outside the Greyhound on the Test at Stockbridge. So they're there now. You can go and book one of those if you like. Sit out on the patio, sit outside in one of those little protected things. They were part of the COVID innovation and are going to be repeated this year. Fuller's, they spent £500,000 last year on patio heaters. And another £4 million now committed to their 80 managed pubs for outside space. And incidentally, they said that if they pick up an inquiry to book a table, the most frequently asked question is, can we book a table under the patio heater outside? Punch Tavern stuck £1 million in alongside their tenants, building these little things, creating other kind of outside space. And their tenants had little kind of links to each other, sharing ideas that they had come up with of stuff that they could build out of wood from B&Q. Been really, really successful. A couple of deals I'll talk about. The Young's tenanted portfolio, we sold that this year, 56 pubs for £53 million. I can tell you for sure that even though that is just coming out of COVID, that price is definitely no lower than the value of that estate in 2019. Great result for Young's. And then the Bell and Bramshaw, everybody's probably driven past that. Client insisted that we put this photograph on the front with the New Forest ponies walking out for some reason. Bloody irritating when you're in a hurry. But again, we sold that well in the middle of COVID and a price which was at least no worse than pre-COVID. Whitehorse and Romsey, going to have its second anniversary on our books, which is never a good thing, but we should be closing down that deal any time now. And again, a little bit of traction coming back out of COVID with buyer interest. Turning to restaurants very briefly, whereas the pub industry had its market correction around 2008, 2009, 2010, when we saw probably about 20% of the pubs lost out of the UK, the restaurant industry didn't. So casual dining was popular at that time. But it had its recorrection 2018, 2019. This slide demonstrates that. The yellow line is the amount of expenditure going through restaurant space. You can see it dropping off. And so this was over-expansion, over-commitment by the restaurant operators, and that needed to correct itself. And that was happening pre-COVID. And that's backed up by this slide here. The big bar on the end, insolvencies in 2019. So in 2019, insolvencies probably double that of 2015. And then this slide here shows, I think, our passion for pubs. We all like eating and drinking out, but the pubs side of the business recovered much quicker. This is the darkest, steep growing line on the end. Restaurants being the pale blue line. And so what you can see is that when we got a choice to go back out and eat and drink again, more of us chose to go to the pub than chose to go to a restaurant. A couple of little bits of information down the right-hand side here. Deliveries, I mean, that's never going to go away now, is it? The 273% increase in delivered food in comparison to 2019. And this is only going to expand. And so what we're seeing already at the moment is lots and lots of branded restaurant operators with requirements for dark kitchens where they're going to cook the branded food and deliver it out to you without your food being cooked in a restaurant. Across the restaurant sector, August was a good month, up 12.5% on 2019, so that was good. But actually really stellar results from lounges, and most of us will be familiar with the Something Lounge, Maritimo Lounge in Ocean Village. Fantastic. I think it's more of a chameleon operation than a restaurant perhaps, because it's all things to all people, but actually fantastic results for them, up 124% this year against 19. A couple of deals we've done. Sold Cold East Mansion just down the road to the owners of Beckett's Restaurant in Southsea, and Ocean Grill in Ocean Village. Not quite the price point of Salt By, but not far off. And those guys have done a great job there. And again, a good improvement on price post-COVID to pre-COVID. Chris here did that deal. And then I've got this slide just to illustrate two sides of the restaurant market. We relet Cotai in Ringwood, which is the left-hand picture, at the same rent that Cotai were paying pre-COVID. And that's probably illustrative of where the market is. Restaurant operators will pay £1,000 a week in rent or less. Those restaurants like the one in Lymington here that were over £1,000 a week have probably taken a haircut on 2019 rents. Loads and loads of requirements at the moment for this end of the marketplace. Independent operators and small multiples in the main. Then last bit, immersive leisure. So that I go back to reflect upon my axe throwing analogy, and it's real. Christ, you can go eat and drink and throw axes at each other. Immersive leisure is another word for the experiential leisure type stuff, where we're going to have sensory overload, things to do, competition against each other, and a bit of food and drink in the to go alongside it. So big space. This is where the department store and some of the big retail space will get used up by this type of occupier. Boom Battle Bar might be one that you have heard of, whereas all sorts of competitions that you can have against your family and friends whilst having a few beers. We will see a Boom Battle Bar in this region fairly soon, and that'll be 17, 20,000 square feet where we'll play mini golf, all of that kind of stuff. But a couple of examples that are in London. The Money Heist is a Netflix type experience where you'll have a bit of food and drink and there will be a robbery in your room. And so the whole thing is set out as an auction room, and you're going to have this robbery experience. Sounds amazing. And then Mamma Mia the Party and a few others like it are the idea of being part of the act. So rather than sitting and watching it going on stage, the act will be happening around you. Again, very, very big space occupancy. And then finally, this is my plug to our hospitality charity, Room to Reward. I really encourage you, if you can, to take a quick look at it. It's about hotel operators or hospitality operators putting their unsold accommodation up for charity workers to be nominated for, so that you can go and stay somewhere nice for a weekend. And so if you've got some accommodation, it's a good thing to donate into. If you're associated with a charity, it's a great opportunity to nominate somebody to go and do something for free. Fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen, that is it. Escape.